What's up, everyone? Welcome on into another episode of the Whiskey Explorer. Thanks so much for tuning in. If this is your first time on the channel, if you could please just a quick favor, hit that comment button, hit the like button, drop a comment down below, let us know what you thought about the video, and we'll get the conversation started here at the Whiskey Explorer. And tonight, guys, we have got a very interesting whiskey for you. Now, I know I have a habit of saying that on the channel, but this is actually really cool. Tonight we have got a dusty bourbon for you. We have got a Jim Beam Decanter from 1980. Here it is sitting on the cask right here. So it's, I'll show you guys some shots of it, of course, in the B-roll. But so I've always kind of been fascinated ever since I got into whiskey and bourbon with dusty whiskeys, and they're hard to come by around kind of my area. And so when I saw this one come up, I think it was like a Facebook Marketplace, and I was searching for a dusty Jim, not necessarily Jim Beam, but kind of any dusty bourbon that I could kind of find, or dusty whiskey for that matter. Of sort of any variety, even a Scotch or an Irish would have been awesome, or a Canadian as well. But I managed to find this one, and I think it was, I was searching around Victoria, but I ended up finding it in Vancouver, so I had it shipped out to me, and it's this really cool Jim Beam Decanter from 1980. It's this globe here, and a little bit more about the decanter. So decanters kind of showed up sometime probably in the 70s. And at that time in bourbon history, bourbon was really struggling as a product, so it wasn't nearly as popular and kind of robust an industry as it is now. They were losing a lot of whiskey and bourbon drinkers to clear spirits, especially vodka at the time, and more kind of the cocktail culture that was going on in the 70s was sort of what was captivating hard liquor sales and audiences of the time. So lots of gin drinkers, lots of vodka drinkers, and they were losing people that were traditionally bourbon drinkers. So one thing that they did in the 70s was they came out with collectible series of decanters. So Jim Beam was actually at the forefront of this, and they have all sorts of different collectible decanters. So they've got, you know, cars, fire trucks, this is a globe. I'm pretty sure they had like a traveler series, and they've got like a nature series with some like squirrels, and there's another one that's like a dog series. So it was sort of basically a gimmick to get people back interested in the bourbon industry. And you know, other things were done at the time as well. Like they came out with like light whiskey, which was sort of more of a clear version of bourbon. That's not quite the full history of it, of course, but that's just kind of giving you the Coles notes of it. So I thought it'd be fun to review this one here on the channel. So we're doing 42-year-old whiskey today, 42-year-old bourbon. Of course, it's not really 42 years old, but it's a decanter from 1980. This one here is 100 months old, so that translates to exactly to 8.3 years. And it's at 40 proof, so that would kind of be a knock against it. But we'll kind of test out this flavor profile, and then I'll compare it to a more contemporary Jim Beam product. I've got a bottle of the Knob Creek small batch, the 9-year, so we'll kind of see how those compare. Alright, so without further ado, let's kind of get into this decanter here. So it's a pretty cool like globe, everything here, it does look probably wood on the camera, but everything here, the armature and all that, is kind of plastic. And it actually does turn in there, which is pretty cool. So it's actually like a rotating globe, which is pretty neat. When I got it, the tack strip was still intact, which is something that I kind of talked about with the seller, just to make sure it was still sealed. You want to get these if you're shopping for one of these decanters, one of these dusty decanters. You want to be careful that the tack seal's intact. The other thing that I checked was that this is actually a screw cap. That's actually an advantage. A lot of the dusty bourbons that have corks will deteriorate or rot away, and it can be a bit of a fight to kind of get those open. And I did have another vintage decanter. I think it was actually even from the 60s. And I might do that on the channel as well for a review. But that one was a lot more complicated. It did have a rotted out cork in it, so I struggled to get it out initially. then it ended up floating in the actual decanter itself, so I had to extract it, and you know, it was a big process. So hopefully we won't have the struggle with this one here. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to just lift this out of here. The whole thing kind of comes out like that, which is kind of cool as well. So you can kind of hold the whole world in your hand there, the Jim Beam Decanter. And then it has like all these zodiac things and a bunch of other stuff. It's actually a really cool decanter, so I was happy to get it. And I'll talk a little bit more towards the end of the video about some other things you have to be careful about with decanters, but let's get into uncorking this anyways. So I'm just going to carefully cut the tack strip on here. I'd like to try to preserve it in as best as condition as I can. The tack strip on this one was fully intact on one side and then kind of hanging on by a little bit on the other. Sort of makes sense for the age that it is and everything. So go ahead there. I've cut through both sides of the tack strip there, and we'll see if this comes off easily. Oh, not too difficult at all. So just a plastic screw top. It smells just like Jim Beam. It smells like literally like just nosing it right out of the decanter there. It smells just like Jim Beam, the Knob Creek, like the 9-year. Anyways, there was a little bit of, I'll show you guys on the camera here, a little bit of coloration on the cap there of the decanter. Ideally you don't want one of those, I don't really know what to call it, white foam kind of things in the top. Obviously, you know, don't have a choice in this matter, but yeah. Anyways, we'll give this one a pour and we'll try it out here. So it's a little, to be honest, it's a little awkward to pour with this plastic thing on it. I think the plastic thing actually does come off, but I haven't really played around with it all that much at all. So I'll pour it in the glass here and then we'll give it a try here if I can manage to pour it. All right, here we go. All right, let's have a look at the liquid in the glass there. Okay, so far so good. It's pretty clear. Oh, it definitely smells weird and dusty, that's for sure. I think that's all I'm gonna pour for now, just to get a little taste of that there. I'm gonna put the cap back on. I'll rest it in the cradle there. So there we go. Definitely nose a little funky for sure, which is kind of you know, to be expected. Right, I kind of expected there to be a little bit of a dusty funk to it. Try to get this back in there as best as I can. There we go. A little difficult trying to do it all on camera, of course, but I'll give you guys a look at the color in the glass there. It's fairly light. I will say, I'm not sure if this is the cleanliness of my glass or the temperature in the studio here, or if it's the bourbon itself. It does look like there's a little bit of clouding to it. It's not bad at all. It's nothing compared to the other decanter that I might review on the channel and show you guys that. But that was like horrendous, so it's nothing compared to that. It still looks pretty clear. Looks, to me, in my opinion anyways, you know, my limited experience with this, of course, very drinkable. Sort of a caramel color there, kind of light caramel tone to the bourbon. I will say this, the flavor, like what is there on the nose, jumps right out of the glass. Lots of butterscotch, lots of vanilla, a real sweetness to it, some honey notes in there, a little bit of molasses, brown sugar, and then it's got a crazy funk to it, like really funky. Almost, there's a little bit of cherry in there, and then it's like, how would I describe the dusty funk? It's like almost like damp book or damp leather, something like that. Something in that sort of realm there. I know that's not being particularly clear, but all right. Let's go one more quick nose, and then we'll go in for a taste. So lots of butter, butterscotch, vanilla. The butterscotch is really dominant. It's like a Werther's, one of those Werther's hard candies. It's a little bit of allspice in the background there, a little bit of cinnamon, brown sugar, honey, vanilla, toffee notes, and then that like the wet wood or wet, you know, old book, old novel, something like that, something from like an old library, damp basement type of funky note to it as well. That's pretty predominant as well. It's mostly the butterscotch, caramel notes, and then the funk that's going on there. All right, without further ado, let's give this a taste. Cheers, guys. Really interesting flavor profile here. I actually have to say, I love this. The funky note comes through almost immediately. So you get a mix of kind of three things at once here. You get vanilla, you get a deep, rich toffee caramel, like a really, it's really that Werther's Original, butterscotch, toffee, caramel, really strong. And then that dusty, funky note is really predominant. So it's like, there is a little bit of a cherry component to it, but it's mostly that kind of old book, old leather, damp basement type of thing, kind of a musty, dusty funk to it, which I fully expected to get on a Jim Beam. Well, it would have been any bourbon really from the 1980s. It would definitely have been a different flavor profile than what we're used to now in bourbon. I want to say that I feel like that dusty, funky note is the oak. I feel like that's the part of that expression there, part of the way the bourbon is expressing itself is a nice kind of like, the funky note might be sweet oak, and it just might be different than what we have now. Like, who knows what the barrels were like there, what the cooperages were like, what the stays were like, what the wood was like. It's hard to say, right? The other thing that I got immediately on the front of the palate on this one was like an effervescent type of tingle. And I'm not sure if that's just like the alcohol separating a little bit or what that is, but a really interesting experience. I'm going to go in here for a second sip. Cheers. Very interesting flavor. It's like almost like marshmallow topping, like that stuff you get that comes in like a jar. It's that white kind of marshmallow stuff. A little bit of confectionery sugar, vanilla, toffees. The musty, dusty kind of basement notes really predominant in there. A little bit of sweet oak, lots of caramel. The finish is actually relatively kind of medium-ish on this one. There is a little bit of spice that comes in at the very end, like a little bit of black pepper and cinnamon. Comes in near the end of the palate there to kind of round this out and give it a nice finish as well. So all in all, a pretty enjoyable experience. I'm really glad that it was pretty darn clear and good to drink. Let's give a quick comparison to a contemporary Jim Beam product. Now, this one's 40% or 80 proof. This is 100 proof or 50% ABV, so not quite a direct comparison. But let's see if we can pick up some of the distillery characteristics of Jim Beam from the old going to a modern Jim Beam product. So I'll just get a little pour of this going. Alright, I don't have very much left in this glass, but the color is literally identical on these. So, I mean, I didn't do too much of a comparison there, but it's pretty much identical. On the color, let's go in for a quick nosing. So on this one, way more of the cherry note jumps forward. So on the nose, this is like vanilla, strawberry cream, cherries, a nice little amount of brown sugar or like confectionery sugar on the top there. Let's go in for a quick taste. Oh, and a little bit of nuttiness on the background there. Cheers. Okay, definitely a big difference here. This one, the Jim Beam, the Knob Creek 9-year small batch, way more of a peanut forward profile to it. Walnut, peanut shell, sweet vanilla, a little bit of sweet oak, cherries, In the mid palate, transitions to baking spices, cinnamon, allspice, a little bit of nutmeg. A really rounded, very pleasant bourbon experience, but definitely different than the flavor profile here. Flavor profile on the dusty Jim Beam here, the Globe, was very much that dusty note was predominant, so the musty dusty basement, sweet oak, vanilla, butterscotches, and caramel. So a really cool little comparison and a cool uncorking of a vintage Jim Beam Decanter. So quickly before we sign off on this video, a couple other quick notes. You do have to be careful with these. In particular, you can kind of see all that nice kind of glazing on the outside of the Globe there. There is lead in the glazes of these decanters, so you do want to be careful about your consumption of them, the amount you consume and everything like that. There's a ton of information online. I did a ton of research on it, but to be honest, it was kind of split on whether or not they're safe to consume. I think it's relatively safe, especially if you drink really in small amounts in moderation. So just a quick disclaimer to do your research before you decide to drink a dusty decanter of any kind. Alright guys, thanks so much for joining me for another episode. Until next time, may your sails be full and your drowns be fuller. Cheers.